Hello, I'm Jim Longman. I'm one of 7 makers at Unison Colour who make our pastels. So I'm always asked what goes into our pastels and how we make them. I can't tell you everything that goes into our pastels, I'm afraid. There's some inorganic pigments, some organic pigments, some other things like kaolin, but I can't tell you everything that goes in there. The percentage of pigments in our pastels varies from colour to colour. The darker pastels are much more colour intense and use 80 or 90% of pigment. The lighter pastels, the lighter shades, use a lot less, down to about 20 or 30% in some cases. Yeah, all the makers definitely have favourite colours. Mine tend to be the quicker drying colours, the darker colours, red 2, some of the dark greens, additional 36, just really nice, heavy, good to work with colours. They feel very almost rubbery and heavy in your hand, and they're very consistent in the roll. Other makers have different favourites. Other makers like a lighter colour, some of the blues. There's one colour called BV12 which I don't like working with. It's beaten me on many occasions. A couple of the other makers pretend they like it. But I think we all hate it secretly, although it is a lovely colour at the end of the day. Our quality control methods are quite strenuous. We do measure out every recipe to John Hersey's original recipes down to the gram. We are very careful with the mixing and the processing of the mix and making sure that it is a consistent colour. But at the end of the day, there's a lady called Hazel, who is our quality control lady, who tests every single pastel that goes through, every batch. And if it doesn't match up to her library of stock colours, then it's sent back to us and we have to remake it. I was taught by a guy called Oliver, who is now our web designer, actually. He was a pastel maker for, I think, about 16 years. He taught me the basis of his technique, which is actually slightly more side hand than mine. He uses that part of his hand, whereas I use the whole of my hand down that way. But he's the guy that showed me how to make a pastel. And yeah, he was very good. There are, as I say, there are other people there that have been doing it longer who produced even better pastels. Eileen and Hazel, 25 years apiece, have been making pastels. But you know, I produce a quality pastel sometimes. There's a stage between where we mix up the pastel and then we roll the pastel that we call dolloping out. I've tried to make them call it quenelles, but they think I'm a soft southerner. Where you spoon out the pastels using ancient spoons onto varying depths of blotting paper, depending on how quick the pastel's going to dry. Some pastels will take all night to dry. Some pastels will take 5 to 10 minutes to dry. So you spoon them out onto these big sheets of A3 blotting paper. You'll work them by squeezing them or moving them until they're at the right consistency to roll into a consistent pastel. And they're all different. Some will take, as I say, 5 minutes. Some require less pressure. Some require more pressure. Some require barely being touched. So yeah, it's a complex process that you pick up with experience and get better with experience. There's definitely a problem with, especially when you're starting this job, with wanting to rush into rolling a pastel. If you pick up a pastel before it's ready to roll, you'll just get your hand covered in pastel, you won't get a good shape, you won't get a good finish, the outside will be stippled because there's too much moisture in it. And a lot of the learning process is having the confidence to know when that pastel's ready to go. As I say, they're all different, but they come in, you know, 50 of them will be a bit like that. The other 50 will be quicker, you know. So it's all about experience and just rolling pastel after pastel, just making sure that you know what you're doing with them. Once we have the pastels rolled out and on the table, we will then cut the ends off the pastels. That's done once again in a handmade way. We use these palette knives. These are very old ones. The older they get, the sharper they get, and the better cut you get. They're very thin and very fragile. We will then get a stick, which is the length of a pastel. Place it in between the 2 palette knives. Make sure the blades are level, and just cut the ends off. Once we cut the ends off, we collect them all up, scrunch them up, make sure there's no air in them, make sure they're a good quality pastel, and then just roll them out again. So there's no wastage. We use every scrap of pastel to make pastels. It's a bit like a never-ending process, because once you've cut the ends, You then have to roll them out and then cut the ends off those, and then you scrunch them up. So it can drag on, but yeah, that's the whole process. The other bit of kit I brought in is very important, and there's a bit of Unison Colour history, which is John Hersey's original standard spoon. I now use this. Before me, Oliver used it, and before that, John used it. It's worn down over 30-35 years of scraping out of a metal pot the pastel, the pigment, and dollop it on the paper. And yeah, one day there'll be nothing left of the spoon, and we'll have to get a new one. But until then, we'll keep using it. A lot of our pastels use heavy metal pigments, but they are all safe. They've been tested. We send all of our pastels off to a place called Duke University in California, and the Californians are very strict on what they will accept as being safe and what isn't. So every single one of our pigments and pastels has been tested for safety. I don't roll them with gloves on. Some people do, but that's only to stop their hands being stained. I don't like the feel of it. We are supplied with face masks, but that's only because of the amount of powder that's during the mixing process. But our pastels are safe. The heavy metals are safe. They're a safe product. We go to great lengths to dry them, so keep them dry. But they're all colour fast. They're all light fast. You know, they're not going to fade. They're not going to deteriorate. I mean, don't put them in an oven, but they can be kept at room temperature in the box or out of the box, and they will be fine. They are light fast pastels.